Good morning. Every few months, it seems, Anne asks me if I want to preach again. And back when the congregation was just getting started, I was on the worship committee and I did a service probably every couple of months. For the last few years, when Anne has asked, I have politely declined, saying something like, I have nothing to say. And a few months ago, she caught me in a moment of weakness, and I said, sure. And I don't know which of us was more surprised. So I started thinking about this sermon on long drives and came up with a working title. I have nothing to say. I was going to talk about a few random, unconnected things and explain how none of it really fit together, so my unifying theme would have been the lack of a unifying theme. A cheap rhetorical trick. Then a few weeks ago, I met Anne for lunch. She had just run into a freshly minted minister of another faith who wondered what UUs could possibly preach about if they can't preach from the Bible. We both laughed, and Anne said something to me like, well, look at the world around you. But that got me thinking in a different direction. UUs have this amazing opportunity to preach from any of a number of sacred sources of inspiration. So let me tell you a story that's almost true. And by that I mean I'm looking back more than 40 years. So the memories are real, but I don't know if all of the details are completely accurate. But it seems about right. I grew up in a moderately religious Jewish family. By the time I was in high school, I was pretty sure there were things about Judaism that I didn't really believe. But that wasn't that unusual. There are all flavors of Jews. There are fundamentalist Jews who believe that every word of the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, each and every one of the 613, yes, someone counted them, 613 laws and commandments contained in those 5 books is the Word of God given to His chosen people, and we are to try to live our lives by those rules. And there are New Age Jews who believe that our forebears gave us important moral underpinnings, but the Bible stories and all those old laws and commandments have to be read in historical context, if we read them at all, and most of them just don't apply today. And there are multiple types of Jews in between, what I like to think of as 50 shades of Jews. So I figured I was just spinning the color wheel of Judaism and I'd find the right shade for me. Now, little did I know that my search would lead me to a completely different color palette, but that's a story for another day. One thing I learned from Judaism is an appreciation for the biblical prophets. The Torah is the word of the Creator, dictated to Moses on Mount Sinai. There are stories, rules, history, and mind-numbing details like the results of the census. That's most of the book of Numbers. It's crazy. Anyway, the prophets made the words accessible and meaningful to the people. If you'll let me torture an analogy or two, the prophets were the tabloid journalists, the headline writers, maybe the Twitter users of their time. They were Judaism's PR people, turning hundreds of pages of history and laws into sound bites and stories that would resonate with the people. They took the sacred word and turned it into language that people could understand. Moses gave us the holy laws, but the prophets helped make those laws understandable and turn those laws into action. Now, have you seen A Knight's Tale? You don't have to admit it. I like that movie a lot, though I don't watch it anymore. It's too much. But I especially like the character of Geoffrey Chaucer, who is just an outrageous promoter for his knight wannabe. And oh, does he have a way with words. Now, in my sometimes twisted mind, That's what I think the prophets were like, telling the people stories using every trick in the book. Fear, murder, intrigue, retribution, love, jealousy, it's all in there. And whatever it took to keep people's attention until the moral was delivered. Now here's an example. The Torah suggests peace in the abstract. Like when God tells the priests to use a blessing over the people that ends with, "The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace." People heard that prayer every week. Many Jews still hear it to this day. But what does it mean to be given God's peace? So along comes Isaiah to tell us what the Creator's peace will look like. When that peace comes, you all know this story, I'm sure, you will beat your swords into plowshares and your spears into pruning hooks, and you won't even study war anymore. Now, for a people who were constantly under attack, that's a pretty radical and very understandable vision of God's peace. Okay, so what's all this have to do with me in high school, you ask? Well, by the time I was in high school, I was pretty sure I wanted to be a lawyer. I'm not sure why, it just seemed to fit. I had a strong sense of right and wrong, loved to read and do research, then take that information, synthesize it into a few key points, debate anyone about anything. Trust me, I was not fun to be around back then. And on a good day, maybe win someone over to my point of view. I think it was 10th grade, and there was a speech contest for our synagogue's youth group. The winner would get to go to the youth group's regional convention and compete against other congregations' winners. Now, our region was pretty cool, literally and figuratively. It basically ringed Lake Ontario from Toronto to Rochester, then came down Lake Erie into eastern Ohio. And I was new to the group, new to the area, hadn't been to a regional convention before, so I figured, why not? The theme of the speech contest was something like justice, morality, and Judaism. And among the suggested readings were the prophet Micah. Micah is a very short book, just 7 chapters covering less than 10 pages. Now, Micah was one of those prophets who did great soundbite. We know his most famous quote, "What does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God?" But let's put that in some context. Micah was taking on the false prophets, orators, rabble-rousers, lawyers, politicians, judges who were trying to use their quest for wealth and power and their skills at manipulating language to lead the people astray. In just those few pages, Micah took down the false prophets and reminded people what the Creator taught us, what it meant to be a person of and with the Almighty. Now, I won't read you too much, but how's this for a warning about false prophecy? "Thus says the Lord concerning the prophets who lead my people astray, who cry peace when they have something to eat, but declare war against those who put nothing into their mouths. Therefore it shall be night to you without vision, and darkness to you without revelation. The sun shall go down upon the prophets, and the day shall be black over them. The seers shall be disgraced, and the diviners put to shame. Hear this, you rulers and chiefs who abhor justice and pervert all equity, who build Zion with blood and Jerusalem with wrong." I told you he could do soundbite. Okay, "because of you, Zion shall be plowed as a field, Jerusalem shall become a heap of ruins." Now, after that, after scaring the wits out of the people, He told them to atone for their sins, but not in the normal way, not by bringing offerings to the altar, a ram to be slaughtered, or some olive oil to be used in sacred rituals. No, Micah tells them it's not that easy. The Creator, he says, has told you what to do, and that's when he lays it on them. What does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Now, to me, way back then, and to me now, those were words filled with awe, words to try to live by. Do justice, love kindness, sometimes translated as mercy, and walk humbly with your God. Now, as a teenager, doing justice seemed like the easy part. Follow the rules, enforce the rules, the law is the law. No problem for a kid who wanted to be a lawyer. As I grew older, I realized how complex justice can be, and how there can be an important difference between what the law says and what is just. But how do you temper that with mercy or kindness? And not just as an afterthought, but to actually love kindness. We are to do justice, that's an action, but we are to love kindness. In Hebrew, the word is ahava. The same word is used for romantic love, love of family, and even sexual desire. So Micah isn't saying to try to be kind. He's telling us we must internalize a deep-seated love for kindness, to hold it as dear as we hold our spouse and family, to make it as much a part of who we are as the deepest love we feel for anyone. Don't just be kind, but make the love of kindness an inseparable part of you. Now that's a lot tougher, and I'm still trying to figure that one out. But then comes the punchline. Walk humbly with your God. Humility. The Hebrew word is tsana, literally to make yourself lowly. Walk with the holy, stay on the right path, try to cast yourself in the Creator's image, and then do it with humility. Make yourself lowly. It's not about you. Don't be all in your face about it with others. Oh, look at me walking with God. No, that's not what he's telling us. Walk humbly with God. Do it because it's right. But no one else needs to know what you're doing or why. You're still human. We're mortal, flawed, fallible, very far from perfect. In other words, show, don't tell. Do justice, tempered with your innate kindness, and don't boast about it. Let your actions speak for you. That's a prophet. Okay. Do you remember in the 1990s, Gatorade had a deal with Michael Jordan and the slogan, "Be like Mike"? Now, if I'd been in high school then, first, I'd be a lot younger today, but if I'd been in high school then, I might have turned that into a T-shirt that said, "Be like Micah." Okay, I hear some of you thinking, saying, good for that kid you were 40-some years ago. Why are you telling us this story today? I'm glad you asked that question. What's today? The 1st of November. This Tuesday is Election Day for our local and judicial elections, but it also marks the start of a one-year countdown to a pretty important election, or what some of my friends in New Hampshire call silly season. And who am I? I'm the guy who loves politics, but dislikes many politicians, and I'm appalled at the way the art of politics is practiced today. You're looking at the kid who used to sit up on election night with my homemade list of every state, the number of electoral votes they had, and then the call made by Huntley and Brinkley or Cronkite. And this was in elementary school. No joke. And I kept doing it until a few years ago when Nate Silver made it so easy to track online. Okay. I'm the 8th grader who adored the unit in social studies when we got to research a U.S. Senate race and then make our prediction and justify it. My assignment was probably the toughest Senate race in the country that year, the race in Connecticut. I did my research and predicted Lowell Weicker would win as a Republican because the incumbent Democrat who lost the primary was running as an independent. I, the precocious 13-year-old, predicted the upset. The two Democrats will split the vote, and this relatively unknown moderate Republican will be elected. I'm the one whose patient teacher explained why I was wrong, that the disgraced incumbent would never get enough votes to keep the Democratic primary winner from being elected in that heavily Democratic state. I'm the one who got the last laugh when Weicker won with a little over 40% of the vote. I have loved politics for as long as I can remember. But I am sick of the current crop of what passes for politicians, for self-proclaimed leaders, for multimillionaires who push people aside rather than give them a hand up. These are not leaders we or our children can aspire to be. When politicians from both parties pander to the polls and the PACs, I want to shout, stop. What do you actually believe? How will you help us be better for each other? Which, after all, is the purpose of government, to protect us, educate us, create a level playing field on which we can play this game we call life. How will you help us become more just and merciful? Be like Micah. When politicians from both parties are unwilling to open the doors of this country to immigrants and refugees who are trying to better their lives and protect their families, to do for the next generation what leaders at the start of the last century did for my grandparents, I must ask, where is your innate mercy, the love of kindness? Be like Micah. When politicians from both sides of the aisle speak of education reform as taking books and teachers out of the schools, diverting resources from children who have the least support at home, teaching to the test instead of teaching to the child, I must ask, is this how you do justice? Where is the kindness, the love? Be like Micah. Now, welfare reformers, again, Democrats and Republicans alike, have concocted a system that provides little food, no money, no child care, no sanitation, and no hope for millions of people in this country. Is this how you walk with God? Is this your definition of justice and kindness? Be like Micah. And I could go on and on. I don't think you want me to. I am appalled by the politicians who think justice means favoring those with money and power, who think kindness and mercy are abstractions that have nothing to do with their lives, who pay more attention to a dollar someone drops on the ground than they do to the homeless woman huddled on the subway grate, and who wear their God on their sleeve, not humbly practicing what the Creator and the prophets preached, but practicing their preaching so they can rise to a pulpit that is higher and louder and more lucrative. Be like Micah. Finally, and yes, to quote a false prophet, the end is near. We must remember that our leaders speak for us. We get the government we deserve. We elected these people. We made them famous. We continue to fan the fires of their fame. Every Facebook post, every tweet and retweet, every bumper sticker and button and book purchase, all of it keeps our real needs from being addressed. What do we say we want? Well, we want a world that is imbued with justice and tempered by kindness, a country in which even those who are most in the public eye acknowledge that they are but humble servants, a state in which our prisons treat people with dignity, a community in which our schools focus on the needs of each child, a valley in which every child is fed, clothed, respected, and loved. We cannot hope to achieve these if we do not hold our leaders and ourselves to these same goals. If we do not ask them and ask ourselves to be a little more like Micah each day. Now, as the reading from John Dewey that Ben read teaches us, we must be mindful that justice and kindness will look different on each of us. Remember what Dewey wrote. How to live healthily or justly is a matter which differs with every person. It varies with past experience, opportunities, weaknesses, and abilities. Turning those ideals into actions will take a different form for you than it will for me. We must be careful not to judge each other on the actions that demonstrate our love of kindness and our pursuit of justice. That's also part of the humility that Micah teaches us. Now, let's take a moment in silence to consider our own personal journeys and talents and contemplate how each of us can humbly enhance our community through acts of justice and kindness. May it be so.